I flew my last mission in northern Iraq in 1992, and I played in the Super Bowl the same year.
That's so crazy. Chad Hennings, superstar interior lineman for the Air Force Academy, A-10 fighter pilot in the 92nd Tactical Fighter Squadron, and 3-time Super Bowl champion with the Dallas Cowboys. Identity plus integrity equals excellence. Can you describe to somebody what integrity means to you?
I had been drafted by the Dallas Cowboys prior to graduating from the Air Force Academy, but I had the military commitment to serve, and I wanted to honor that. But when I was going through pilot training, I get tickets from the Cowboys, and I'm there watching the guys in my draft class, Michael Irvin, Ken Norton Jr., watching these guys play, and in my heart, it was just tearing me up. In my head, I knew I made a commitment, and I struggled with that. But the thing is, that's the beauty of the struggle. Wrestle with God. Don't pray, God, keep me away from trials, but God, strengthen me through them. So integrity for me is...
It's not every day you get to interview someone who's flown fighter jets for a living. It's also not every day that you get to interview someone who's won not just one, but 3 Super Bowls. And it's really not every day that you get to interview someone who's done all of that. And don't get me wrong, it was pretty sweet to ask those kinds of questions. But I really enjoy the way that the conversation turned out in regards to talking about identity, integrity, and most importantly, finding successful relationships with Christ, with your family, with your friends, anybody in your life. Commitment is not something a lot of 20-somethings think about. We got situationships going on all over the place. But Chad Hennings exemplifies what it means to be committed to every single thing that you do. I think you're going to be pretty surprised in a pretty awesome way as to the course that this conversation took, because all those pretty sweet accomplishments that I listed before, as cool as they are, that's not who Chad is. And I'm really excited for you to hear all about him. If you enjoyed today's conversation and you want to see even more incredible conversations with pretty awesome guests, definitely follow along, leave a rating. It's the best way to grow the show, and I can't thank you enough for being a supporter. Thank you for tuning into the R20s podcast. Without further ado, Chad Hennings. Chad, you are follower of Jesus, husband of Tammy, father of Chase and Brenna, United States Air Force pilot, and 3-time Super Bowl champion with the Dallas Cowboys. And no, that's not your intro for today. I wanted to list that off in that very specific order because I know that order is very important to you, that you describe yourself in that way. And it's not about what you've done. It's about the relationships that you have. And I know that if a lot of young people were asked right now, how would you describe yourself? Whether it's talking to a new person or in a job interview, I don't think they would describe themselves in that type of order. If anyone's listening right now and they're struggling to find their own identity and they're struggling to see who they are as opposed to identifying with their accomplishments, what would your message be to them to help them understand that you are not what you do?
You know, Tommy hit the nail on the head. Identity is the foundation. Identity is the key to everything in your life going forward. You have to realize that what you do does not define who you are. I ask that same question to a lot of people. I've mentored individuals separating from the military or former athletes going into quote unquote the business world. Yeah. And I'll ask them that question: who are you? And they'll say, I'm Joe Blow. I'm a former F-16 fighter pilot, or I'm specialist so and so that I was a former Navy SEAL, or I was a former running back. I go, no, man, that's what you do. Yeah, that's not who you are. And the way that you ordered that priority is exactly, I struggled with that. My whole identity was one that used to be based on performance, always performing. And we may tap into some of whatever the accomplishments that I've had. But my identity, what I have found is who I am is a son of the living God. Yeah. That is first and foremost is my filter that I view the world through. That is who I am. That is what is my purpose, my mission. Everything derives from that. So that falls as to who I am as a husband, as a father, as a man of God, as a businessman. Everything goes through that filter. And that's what I encourage individuals to figure that out. Because if you start thinking that, hey, I'm in finance, I'm a banker, I'm a stockbroker, I'm an analyst, this, that, you're going to chase those worldly things. And as Pascal says, that inside man is a God-sized vacuum that only God can fill. Nope. You're going to fill with everything but what the one thing that can bring you true satisfaction, as well as contentment and joy, and that is the love of our Heavenly Father. So that, to me, if you're struggling with that identity piece asset, who am I? What is the filter in which I view the world through? That's what you got to get settled first and foremost before you can do anything else.
I couldn't agree more. And for me, it's been a real struggle to get to that point, but I'm really happy with the progress that I've made just in my connection with the Lord. And the steps that he's allowed me to take to get to this point now where I can have these types of conversations. I can feel confident in my relationship with him. And it really has been game changing just to see how once you're in tune with God, everything becomes easier. You know that he has your back every step of the way. And these worldly desires, they're so secondary. And I know it's really hard when we're young that it's natural to fall into them. You want the money, you want the attention, everything. Of course, I did too, and I still do in points. But there really isn't anything like a relationship with Christ. And I liked how you touched on it too. I do want to talk about your accomplishments today, but I want to talk to them more in the relational aspect of them, the people that helped you along the way, the people that were in your life throughout those accomplishments, because I think those relationships are the real keys to life as a whole. Without our relationships, we aren't anything. And I want to start with your journey into the Air Force. And I just find this story so fascinating that your coach, Reese Morgan, he drove 900 miles out to go hand deliver a tape of you to the coach at Air Force just so you can get into the academy. And then later on, that coach that received the tape was the one who helped you get the waiver so that you could fly fighter jets. Just those two incredible acts of selflessness are enough to completely make a man. And it's all because of relationships and the sacrifices that other people make for us. Have you ever had conversations with those two, just asking why they were so selfless and what promoted them to do it? And whether you did or you didn't, what did you take away from those experiences in terms of being able to help the next generation so you can be in that kind of fatherly role to someone else?
Yeah, amen. You did your homework. I compliment you on that. I think the highest compliment um, moniker that I can give an individual is to call them coach. My coaches aside from my parents and family members, had the biggest impact in my life. What Coach Morgan did for me, a little more detail, he had asked between my junior, senior year, what I wanted to do. I wasn't highly recruited at that point in time. And I told him I wanted to play Division I college football. And he, then took, and I thought I would really like to go to the Air Force Academy. He took it upon himself to put a highlight reel, as you said, together and travel all the way out to Colorado Springs and deliver that to Mike Gould, the coach.
Yeah.
He totally changed the whole trajectory of my life. And I've asked him that. I've honored him, both those men, in that same way. And I can tell you that both men are men of faith. They're total selfless servants. They're what I would call a true coach. Who he handed my film off to, Mike Gould, ended up being a 3-star general, superintendent at the Air Force Academy. He leads our alumni association now, and he's a true friend to this day. Both men have been mentors, but they realized early on that if you can help others succeed, you succeed. A rising tide lifts all boats. That they truly helped and realized that when the team succeeds, we succeed. I mean, we can succeed as individuals, that it's not about me. And if you don't mind, I'd like to just kind of go back, and I want to
Of course.
encourage you to, give yourself some grace. Because I use an athletic analogy or metaphor in regards to describing, I'd say, 3 phases of an individual's life. When you're in your teens, in your 20s, just graduated from college, kind of like how you are right now, trying to figure out life.
Yeah.
You're like that freshman or that rookie on the team. Man, you're trying to figure it out. You're trying to make the team. You're trying to learn the offense or the defense. You're just trying to learn what your role is on the team. That's the same thing in life, right? You're just trying to figure out where you fit in, your identity, who you are, etc. Then when you get in your 30s and into your 40s, you're kind of like that player coach. You're that vested veteran. You're the captain of the team. You know the offense, defense, and you realize that you've had success. You know your position very well. Now you realize that, hey, for my success, the team has to be successful. So I'm going to start being that kind of quote unquote player coach where I'm going to lift up the younger teammates. I'm going to mentor them. I'm going to bring them along because they're going to help advance, the team goals, of which I'll benefit from that too. Then when you're like me in your 50s and your 60s and beyond, you realize that, hey, I've been there, done that.
Yeah.
And I've accomplished, what I've wanted to do. Now it's all about being that coach, being that wise man that's sitting at the gate of the city, of where your whole purpose then is relationships, of building up the next generation. And I tell kids, because I was the same way, and I've thought a lot about this, is that when you're young, go out, get after it. but realize where your identity lies, that it's not based on performance. It's not one based on what you do. You're a child of God. What does God want all his children to do? To do stuff with excellence. If God has given you the ability to be a businessman, go out there, make as much money as you can, but don't make the money, the performance, the accolades, the idol that you strive for. Maintain that sense of humility, that sense of self-reflection, that God gave you the ability to do that, and you honor him with your abilities by doing your best.
Yeah.
So that's, just kind of, it has given me peace and solace. That's how I've, tried to lead my life. And that's why I do what I do now. That's why those men realized at that point in time in their lives that relationships, building others up, assisting others, in God's economy, go and make disciples, right? That is the one commandment that he tells us, and that's what he wants us, from each and every one of us, to do.
Amen. Wow, that was incredible. And it's just so difficult with the social media culture that we're in, the me type of focus that we all have at this young age. We're all trying to get to the next step in our career, get to that next step where we get to a new city, just find our own way. And we get so distracted that we ignore God's love. We ignore these relationships in our life. And it really does hurt us. And I know it's only temporary and it's going to grow. And like you said, we're in that freshman year phase right now. We're all trying to figure stuff out. We're getting the playbook down. And once we do and we shift over to the next phase, I know a lot of us are going to start thriving. And it's just one day at a time. And it's hearing messages like that, Chad, that I think are so important for young people to hear. And everything I read about you, I've always just marveled at how mature you seemed for your age. I have a great admiration for anybody that goes to military academies. I myself really wanted to go to West Point growing up in New York. I went through the whole process, got the congressional nomination. I ended up getting a denial because I have food allergies. That's a completely different story. But going into the academy, if reflecting on it now, that was such a me focused thing. I wanted to do it because I thought it was a really cool status symbol. My father was in the military. Both my grandparents were in the military too. And it was kind of like, all right, my parent did it. My grandparents did it. I want to follow in the familial chain. I think it would be a really cool status symbol, but it wasn't this we focused. I was never like, oh, I'm going to be with a great group of guys, great group of gals, and we're going to do something amazing. Maybe I would have gotten to that point if I had gone through with it, but that was definitely not at the forefront of my mind. Thinking about your story too, something that definitely wasn't at the forefront of my mind was the sacrifice that's involved with all of it. You're making a decision when you're 17, 18 years old that you're going to go into the academy, and then you're going to serve. In this case, correct me if I'm wrong. Was it 8 years before they reduced it down? Was that the yeah?
Correct.
So you had signed up for an 8-year service, and you're going to fly fighter jets. You have no idea what the condition is going to be like when you come out of school, and you're setting yourself up to make the ultimate sacrifice at such a young age. How are you able to come to that conclusion yourself, and you're solidified in your choice? And I know I want to touch on it too, that there's a lot of strings pulling you with the NFL and potentially coming back, but you stay true. You have this incredible level of integrity, and you say to yourself, if it comes down to it, I'm going to make this ultimate sacrifice.
I think it had a lot to do with my parents and how I was raised, and the whole aspect of, living that life of excellence. I came, don't get me wrong. I did it for selfish reasons. I would have paid for them to let me be a fighter pilot. What I was able to do and to experience, it was unlike anything else. So, it wasn't purely, I did it for selfish reasons too, because it was so cool.
Yeah.
But, I define living excellence as this. It's having a strong sense of identity and purpose, and then living each day as being a force of character, someone that lives to be their best self every day. They encourage others to do the same. And, the organizations or associations you're affiliated with encourage you to rise to a higher noble purpose or cause.
Yeah.
I throw a lot of this stuff out there, but it's, not every day you're going to have your A game, but you can do it. You can give your best shot, and you can do it with integrity and with purpose. And as long as you have that identity piece, then you can live that out. But for me, it was, I always wanted to serve. I wanted that aspect of, quote unquote, to see if I had the right stuff, able to put myself in situations where, as God says, it's through my weaknesses I find my true strength. Is that I don't know how I'm going to figure this out. I don't know if I have the ability to continue to do this, but through God's grace, and I'm going to continue to push myself and to better myself.
Yeah.
And that's where you talked about before mentioned failure. I have learned more through my failure and through my stumbling than I have through any of my victories
Yeah.
in life. So hopefully that answers your questions. But
Absolutely.
I think I can relay a little bit more with this, that you talked about this selfish me generation. I go back and I look at one of my favorite authors. You may be familiar with him. You live in New York. His name's Jonathan Haidt. He's a professor at NYU. If you've read his stuff, The Righteous Mind, The Happiness Hypothesis, and The Coddling of the American Mind, in each and every one of his books, he makes reference to a pioneer sociologist, a guy by the name of Emil Durkheim, where Durkheim traveled all over Western Europe in the latter part of the 19th century studying communities. And he found in communities where there wasn't a common moral foundation, a common identity, a common sense of purpose, there was a decrease in happiness and an increase in suicide. And I say that, this is over 100 plus years ago, he found that out, but I look around in our country and our communities today, that's a perfect description of what they are.
Yep.
But I love this quote that he said, that Durkheim said. He said, the more weakened the groups to which a man belongs, the less he depends on them, the more he consequently depends only on himself and recognizes no other rules of conduct than what are founded in his own private interests.
Yeah.
So what that means, it's all about me. And I look around the kids today as who are we affiliated with? And this is where teams and family and the body of Christ is so important. By clinging together with that, you're a part of it. You're part of something greater than self. That aspect of selfishness tends to go away the more you pursue Christ, and the more you're affiliated, the more you get engaged, the more you volunteer, the more you do. That is your sense of identity and purpose, and that is truly what God is calling us to do and to be.
I've noticed it in myself too. Once I really started to embrace his message and just the messages that he keeps sending me, I just feel different when I'm walking around. Like, I don't feel like I want to be in tune with myself. I want to be in tune with other people. I want to be in tune with what they're doing, what their needs are, and I want to be able to be in a position to help them. I don't want to be in a position to help myself. It's been incredibly rewarding. And when I see more friends of mine, when I see just random peers doing random acts of kindness, actually taking the time out of their day to pick up the phone, call somebody, check in, it just makes my day, because we're so siloed off nowadays. We really don't understand what's going on in the world as a whole. We're just so concerned with our own little world that we don't even take the time to focus on the world around us. And your time in the military, you were part of Operation Provide Comfort, and you had a really unique experience that I want to ask just how that helped shape your mindset around what's going on actually in the world. And what I mean by that is you were introduced to some people who were in a part of the world where they were being persecuted for their religious beliefs. Now, of course, we can say that in this country today that there is certain stigma around certain beliefs, and it's not as open as it used to be in terms of expressing your beliefs, but nowhere near the level of actual persecution. When you see that in the flesh and you're meeting these people and you're interacting with them for the first time, how did that alter your mindset, especially when you come back home and now you can say to yourself, wow, some people are going through this type of experience. I need to make sure that I'm doing this when I get home to make sure that I'm living the best life that I can.
Yeah, let me put a chronological perspective on that. What you're talking about occurred 30 years ago, where we didn't have Fox News, we didn't have a lot of these alternative media outlets. And what you would see, you kind of read about in a paper, and to read about it in some faraway land, there's no personal connectivity. There's not that emotional attachment piece to it. What you're referring to is went to chapel services at the base where I was flying missions out of in Incirlik, Turkey, near the city of Adana, and there would be Turkish nationals, and this was back when Turkey is more Muslim today. It has more of an Islamic flavor. Back then, it was very secular.
Yeah.
But yet, at the same time, in remote regions of Turkey, northern part of Syria, kind of that northwestern Iran, northern part of Iraq, you'd hear stories of Christians that were being persecuted for their faith, verbally abused, accosted, whether that be from a Muslim population in that part of the world or whatnot. And back then, again, 30 years ago, we're used to seeing a lot of that and hearing about that now. But back then, that was a foreign concept. And I'm like, are you serious? There's people, I mean, you're actually, you knew about it, but talking to someone where they were beaten or they're verbally abused. And you hear stories of some Christians that are even martyred, killed for their faith.
Yeah.
And that had a profound impact on me is because I kind of introspectively looked at myself, and it's like, man, I'm taking my faith for granted.
Yeah.
And I've read a lot of books. Friends of mine, Tom Doyle has written a great book on visions and dreams, and on Christ or on Muslims or on people in certain parts of the world that have made a profession of faith. And a lot of times that profession of faith is a death sentence.
Yeah.
And where they make that profession of faith, they fully expect to die for their faith. And putting that in perspective to me and a lot of our American church members today, if you had it on the line like that, that if you made a profession of faith and it's not good for you, go up, make a profession of faith at the altar and, go home and have brunch then. But when you do that, you expect to die for your faith. How many people would actually be brazen enough and brave enough and courageous enough to do that? So that's kind of the thought process that I went through, is like, man, as my faith cost me things. It's kind of like Bonhoeffer's Cheap Grace versus Costly Grace in his book, The Cost of Discipleship. I mean, I'm just going through the motions, or is the grace that God has given me, am I obedient to him to want to live the life and to stand up for professing his name as my Lord and Savior?
Yeah.
And that's where, again, identity, you need to look at yourself and say, if I was in that situation, I know everybody would say they do it, but truly think about it. If there's somebody who's going to harm you or do something to you, would you still profess Jesus as your Lord and Savior? And that's where we have to be at the point in all of our faith to be willing to put it on the line in that manner to tell others about Jesus.
Yeah. And, everything that you're saying just making me think about having a successful relationship, right? I try to structure the show all around success. And God even says directly to us that there will be people who are going to come at us just for our beliefs, and we will be challenged almost on a daily basis for what we believe in. How have you personally gone about just being comfortable in your own skin, not being afraid to shy away from spreading the message of the Lord? Because I know, especially in New York, yeah, I feel comfortable talking about my beliefs, but it's definitely not something that I go out of my way to talk about. And it's not something that's just openly discussed in your public park or anywhere if you're just going for a walk or something like that. I know it's a bit different down south where religion is still more prevalent, but it's definitely a shift away here. So I'm just interested to see, how have you just gotten to a place right now where you're comfortable with who you are and you're able to express these beliefs so openly and freely?
It's been a process. It's been a journey. Our Christian faith, it's not a destination. It's not a one and done thing. As they say, Paul alludes to, it's between the already and the not yet.
Yeah.
I have been sanctified by God, but I'm not there to eternal life just yet. I've got to do this stuff in between. They call it the dash, living the dash. And I can say that, I was never always, I'm still in that process. I become more comfortable in who I am because I realize, to your point, God's economy. I used to think that, man, I needed to do all these things. I need to write books. I need to speak in front of all these people. I need to show God how much I love him and do all these extravagant things in ministry so that I can hear those words, well done, good and faithful servant. But I realized, what is the will of the Father? It's to believe in the one whom he has sent. What does he want from me? What he wants from me is just to create relationships. It's to disciple others. Yeah. It's that one-on-one. That's what gets me fired up now. And it's not, I still go on and speak and I do all the other stuff, write the books and blah, blah, blah. But what really moves the needle is just having those one-on-one conversations. And it's not brazen. It's got to be, your faith has to become a part of who you are so that it's a natural extension of conversation. And it's not something that's forced.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not, when you're in New York, you're in a prime mission field, but it's not, hey, my goal is intent is to get this person saved.
No.
Well, if that's your attitude, become their friend first.
Yeah.
Show them, model it. Don't just talk the talk, but it's actually walking the walk and model it in there, because that's the most attractive thing that are going to draw people to you is your actions more so than your words.
Yeah. We're always leading by example, whether we realize it or not. And even if we're not trying to be a leader, everyone's taking a look at you at least at one point or another. And if you're trying to show something on the outside and it doesn't correlate with what's going on the inside, people are going to notice that. And I think that really ties to integrity, which is something I've also heard you talk about a lot. And to me, I think that's a character trait that is becoming a lost art, where I want to focus on one aspect in particular, which is if you start something, you better finish it. Because I think a lot of people have become very comfortable with this idea of quitting. And of course, I think there's a time and place to quit. But I also think that there's a time and place where you absolutely don't. If you make a commitment, and commitment, again, is another key word which you harp on. If you make a commitment, you honor that commitment. And I want to kind of bring it back to your service. And I found something. It was from Sports Illustrated from 1992. So this was the year getting ready to come back into the NFL, and it's a quote, and they're alluding to your squadron commander had to get to a point where you were getting so many phone calls about when's Chad coming back, when's Chad coming to the NFL, that he didn't allow you to answer the phone anymore because it was tearing you apart so much. And you had a quote, and it said, "For the first time in my life, I wasn't into something with heart, mind, and soul. I wanted to be in pilot training, but I was torn about football. I never really talked about it to anybody, including my parents, and we were really close. I was afraid people would think I was trying to shrink my responsibility to the Air Force and find a way out. It took a long time before I was mentally settled and felt comfortable with myself." And there are two real prongs I want to harp into there. Is this idea that we feel like some of these really tough experiences that we're going through, we have to go through them by ourselves. And the second part is the integrity aspect of it. First, I want to ask, going through that by yourself, how could you describe the emotional toll that that's taking on you? And if you had to go through it again, do you think you would reach out more to your parents or anybody else? And the second part is you ultimately decide that you're going to stick out your service, and then they ended up reducing the amount of service time that you had to have. But how important was it to you, in hindsight especially, that you stuck to your guns and you had that integrity? And can you describe to somebody what integrity means to you?
Yeah, I mean, you got several questions there. I'll work on that. First one regarding going through that. I realized that I was a lone wolf, that I was struggling with this, that I didn't need to. If I had to go back and do it all over again, I realized later in life that we were created for relationships.
Yeah.
We need to be a part of relationships. We weren't meant to John Wayne it, John Rambo it, or Jason Bourne, whatever your age group analogy for your movie heroes that we have. Lone Ranger, the lone warriors taking on the world by themselves.
Yeah.
And that was the impetus for me. They ended up starting a ministry called Wingman, was just because of that, because I did not have those relationships where I could open up the kimono and admit that I struggled,
Yeah.
that I didn't have it all together. The society in our world tells us, particularly for men, that, hey, you got to be strong. You can't show any weakness. You got to do this, that.
Yep.
And that, unfortunately, is what led to a lot of our military members coming back with post-traumatic stress, and why the suicide rates are 22 veterans taking their lives every day is because of that. They don't have those relationships where they can be open and honest and transparent. Help me process this. I'm not holding it together. I just need somebody to talk to. That is the key that I wish I had back then. But still, it helped me just kind of get the feelings off. But going through that time period, I went through pilot training in Wichita Falls, Texas, which is at Shepherd Air Force Base. It's just an hour and a half outside the DFW area. I had been drafted by the Dallas Cowboys prior to graduating from the Air Force Academy, but I had the military commitment to serve, and I wanted to honor that. But when I was going through pilot training, I get tickets from the Cowboys. Gil Brandt, the former Cowboys player personnel director, who's now in the Hall of Fame, would send me tickets for my buddies and myself. Hey, we're going to go 50-yard line seats, sideline passes. And I'm there watching the guys in my draft class, because I was drafted, prior to graduating, Michael Irvin, Ken Norton Jr., watching these guys play. And in my heart, it was just tearing me up, because I wanted to be out there to, quote unquote, see if I had the right stuff to compete.
Yeah.
In my head, I knew I made a commitment, and I had a conscious aspect. And that's where you read that article, to reconcile those two emotions, feelings, viewpoints of the world. It took everything I had, and I struggled with that. But the thing is, that's the beauty of the struggle. I mean, wrestle with God. That's what Paul did. That's what Isaac did. Or Jacob did. Wrestle with God. Ask questions, and that's what makes you stronger, makes you better. It's the trial. Don't pray, God, keep me away from trials, but God, strengthen me through them, so that I can come out a better man, strong, better, faster, stronger, whatever, from going through that time of turmoil. So integrity for me is there's different aspects of integrity, truthfulness, honesty, humility, the willingness to listen to others. There's both kind of moral integrity, and then there's characteristics of that we all strive, but with that, it's that aspect of just trying to be a better person, a better Christian, better husband, better father, and it's thinking of others first before yourself.
Yeah. Beautifully said. I think, I alluded to a lot of us being quitters, but I also think a lot of us are runners, where we're not ready to give up, but we're certainly ready to go run away a little bit and get a little bit of separation at the first sign of struggle. And I don't know if it's just a character trait of our generation as a whole, or maybe it's something that's just been a cultural shift, but we're far more risk adverse than we used to be. And to me, if I want to live a successful life, if I want to find the maximum amount of joy in my life, I have to take those risks in order to get to a place that I want to be. And that place that I want to be is having an amazing relationship with Christ, having an amazing relationship with other people, and being able to have the time in my life to do these incredible things. But you don't get there just by not doing anything. And if I had to make one comment about all of your accomplishments, is that you never stopped doing anything. And I know that a lot of people can say like, "Oh, okay, what does that mean?" What that means to me is that we can look at the list of your accomplishments and it goes on for a while, but it's those moments in the dark where nobody's watching what you're doing, but you're constantly putting in the work, whether that's mental work, it's physical work, always trying to take that next step to be better than you were the day before, strengthen your relationship with yourself, strengthen the relationship with God. And it's that incremental benefit, slowly compounding over time, I think is what makes us into the people that we want to be. If you had to think about it going into now your career in the NFL, was there any moment in time that you said to yourself, okay, these are the steps that I need to take, and I need to set myself up in such a way so that I can take these steps? Was there anything that you weren't doing before you made that transition over to the NFL that you needed to do either mentally or physically to be able to set yourself up for success in this next chapter of life?
One of the things, just to kind of highlight, to give your listeners a semblance of how fast that transition happened. I flew my last mission in northern Iraq in 1992, and I played in the Super Bowl the same year.
That's so crazy.
That's how fast, it changed. And what helped, though, and I've realized that I'm a firm believer in universal truths, the thing that helped me be a fighter pilot, the mental acuity, the preparation, both the physical, the mental preparation, game planning, how I communicated with my wingman, how we would execute our mission, how at the end of our mission we would evaluate our film, whether that be on a training dropping bombs on the range or whatever. We kind of debrief what did we do well, what did we do not so well, how can we continue to improve.
Yeah.
Those same lessons were the exact same thing in a different twist in the NFL. How I prepared, evaluating film of my opponent, practicing, working out, exercising, lifting weights, becoming better physically, how we'd execute the mission on the field, how I communicated with my fellow defensive linemen on what games or stunts we were going to run, and then afterwards how we debriefed on what we did well, what we didn't do so well.
Yeah.
And again, it's that mindset. I call it, it's a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Growth mindset, I can always improve. I know what my physical abilities are, but I can always find a way to continue to improve and better myself. Versus, hey, this is who I am. I'm not going to get any better. This is all you're going to get. Yeah. That fixed mindset. And it is. And everything is a choice. Tommy, whether that's a choice to be an individual of character, choose to be live a life of excellence, or you choose to have that growth mindset. Figure it out. And that's, it's the beauty, because I realize I'm never going to be perfect and I'm never going to be there. But it's always something that you can continue to improve upon and continue to push yourself and better yourself. Has always, I was very fortunate to have had that attitude since I was a young kid in middle school.
I wish I was that young kid in middle school. I was so in my head in middle school. I had the confidence of like the size of a pea, honestly. It took me a while to get to that point. But when I did, and I still think I'm on my journey too, I don't think it's nearly close to being done. But once I had that growth mindset instilled in me, I would say honestly, it happened about a couple of years ago. It's changed my life. Absolutely. No longer do I think I'm not capable of doing anything. I think with God, especially, anything's possible. I mean that in all sincerity. I know some people will say that's so cliche, but it's so true. if I put my mind to it, I know. First of all, I don't think in short time horizons anymore. I think in long term. And when you're thinking with God, I'm thinking eternal. So that's forever. When I'm with God, I have forever to do whatever I want to do. And it's been such a game changer. And another quote that I've heard you say, and we've touched upon both parts of these, is identity plus integrity equals excellence. Sum it up in one. I'm a big math guy. I studied math in school. That's a pretty simple equation to get behind. And playing with the Cowboys, I mean, that's the definition of excellence right there. The Cowboys in the 90s, too. I don't want to make you feel old. I wasn't even born when you were playing. But
Yeah.
I mean, I've been informed about the 90s Cowboys. I mean, Aikman, Emmett, Michael Irvin, Dion. I mean, the list goes on. Charles. I, I can name Hall of Famers upon Hall of Famers on that whole team. And what's crazy is I don't even need to watch highlights of the Cowboys to know about the excellence. The brand is excellence. And it's kind of crazy. Two things that I've actually seen from those teams, and I'm a big football guy, but I haven't watched the tape from that far back. When I was a kid, we used to get shown the commercial of Emmett. I don't know if you've ever seen this. It's a commercial of Emmett, and he's doing sit-ups. And I think it might have been after the second Super Bowl he won, maybe even the third. And he's doing sit-ups, and he's like, "Oh, champion again! Time to take a little bit of a break." And he does a sit-up, and he gets to the top, and he takes like a deep breath, and he goes, "All right, back to work." And he goes back up and down, back up and down. And it's like a commercial all about like staying committed, staying on the grind and stuff like that. We got shown that all the time when we were growing up playing baseball. Just all about commitment. And the other thing was, I think it would, correct me if I'm wrong, it was the 92 or 93 Super Bowl where you blew out the Bills and Don Beebe's play. I got shown that all the time as the definition of what commitment looks like. When your team is completely down, there's no hope left, but you don't give up on the mission. You don't say, "Okay, I'm gonna throw in the towel, done." No, you play to the whistle, you play to the game's over. And I got shown that all the time. And I was wondering, is there any moment in your career? I know it's hard to pinpoint one, but maybe it's just like an overall theme if you can't pinpoint one of something that took place either on the field, off the field, just what commitment truly looks like to you. I know you're working with incredible people and their work ethic is at a different level compared to just your normal person. Is there anything that you saw interacting with coaches, teammates, anyone in between that you were like, wow, that memory stuck with me?
You know, just kind of a general principle or philosophy in the fact that those teams, I have never been around a group of individuals that was more selfless.
Yeah.
They did whatever it took. They were the best at their position. And it was all about winning not just games, but Super Bowls. I mean, that was the mentality. We're going to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And they did whatever it took, offense, defense, special teams. You know, we at the Cowboys were something very unusual. We didn't have starters. A lot of our guys, we play special teams. Most people don't want to play special teams, particularly if you're a starter, but that's what a lot of us did because we knew it was going to help the team. And, you know, of course, you refer to like Michael and Emmett and Troy, you know, they wanted the ball. Michael wanted he wanted the ball thrown to him every time, every play of every series. But he realized that, you know, the team took precedence. And that's why I realized, and I tell a lot of kids up and coming today, is that, you know, don't be so concerned about your individual accolades. Be the best at your role, performing your role, and all the individual awards, that'll take care of itself.
Yeah.
Because if the team is successful, you're successful. And that sense of selflessness. And that's what I saw on those teams. And that's what has stuck with me, you know, now in the business world and, you know, in my philanthropic outreach. So it's definitely a truth to live by.
Well, that's how you got your start too, right? You started off on special teams once you joined the team, and that's how you got on the field, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about you got to do what you got to do in order to just show that you're into it. That's half the battle right there. So many people want to get there and they want to be at the top the second that they show up. You got to start somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was where, you know, I had left, for your listeners. I had my last year in college. I was pretty successful, All-American, outlet
You're
trophy.
pretty good.
You know, led the nation in quarterback sacks, MVP of 2 different bowl games, All-Star game and a regular game. But when I got to the Cowboys, I was inactive. I sat on my butt. I didn't even get a dress out. My first 8 games with the Cowboys, I was inactive, standing on the sidelines in civilian clothes. And finally, I went up to Coach Johnson. I said, "Coach, man, I'll do whatever it takes to play. I'll be on special teams." Yeah. So as a defensive lineman, I was running down kickoffs. You know, I was on the punt team. I ended up doing all these things, but I got playing time. It helped build my confidence in myself. And then, as we were blowing guys out, then I'd get playing time in the fourth quarter, and the second half, I
Yeah.
start finding my way in the defensive rotation, eventually working my way into that starting role. And that was, you got to start someplace. Put pride aside, put all that aside. And it's just, again, what can I do to help the team?
Yeah.
And that other stuff, it just takes care of itself.
I mean, you start on special teams, and then by the end of your career, you're getting 2 sacks in your 3rd Super Bowl win. That sounds like a pretty good career progression to me. And again, it's you have to put in the time. You have to put in your dues. And if you're not willing to do that, then honestly, you're not ready for commitment as a whole. Um, the guys that you're around, I've heard you talk so much about just their quality. And guys like Mark Tuinei, Nate Noonan, Charles Haley, how they would just make you laugh all the time. And that must be quite the experience. You're going through a pretty grueling schedule, but you're also able to just connect with them on a very human level. And one thing that I loved hearing about going back to Faith was that the entire D line was practicing Christianity at the time. They were practicing faith. And, we'll see guys all the time get on the TV and they'll thank God for the victory. They'll thank God that they let them to have the strength to do it. I know so many people of mine are like, why are they thanking God right now? Like, why does God care about football? Can you talk about a little bit about just the relationship you and the D line had specifically, how you would go about, even if you didn't pray together, even if you didn't focus on that faith aspect together, but how does God play into football? How do you get the strength through him to go out there every day, go through this grueling schedule, perform on Sundays and everything like that?
Fill in the blank, whatever you do. I
Yeah.
mean, it was football. Could have been flying jets. It could be as a student. It could be fireman, teacher, coach. Whatever you do, you want to do it, as I alluded earlier in our conversations, do it to the best of your ability. That's why you glorify God is,
Yeah.
God, thank you for giving me the abilities to do this. God, and I want to do my best to glorify and honor you, to show you that I'm not flaunting and I'm not flaunting my talents. That
Yeah.
God, I acknowledge what you have done for me. And that's where a lot of the guys, on the whole team for that matter, kind of had that mentality. And again, whether you conscious of it or not, that team, it was all servant leaders, because it wasn't about them. It was about the team, about lifting others up. Very encouraging. Granted, we had a lot of fun there. He's a lot of guys, and you're right. I mean, guys are guys in the locker room, and a lot of it was not necessarily all PG-13, but there was a lot of stuff that went on, and that you needed that atmosphere and culture to laugh, to have a good time, because what we went through, particularly like now we're in, I'm in the state of Texas. It's 105 degrees outside right now, and to go through 2-a-days practices like that, it's a grind.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a beatdown. It's a physical challenge, but that's where you need the humor, and that's where you need to kind of lift everybody else up. And when you're having a bad day and you help somebody else and they help you, man, you get through it together.
Amen. And I really wanted to ask that question just so everyone else can hear your response, because when I ever hear like, oh, why bring God into sports? Why even mention him? Because God, he does everything. He's always there. You just got to be looking for him, and you always got to be thankful for what he's doing for you. And I'm so glad that you and all the guys that were on the Cowboys were. I mean, we can go on and on about your playing career, and I would love to, maybe even offline. One other fun fact I just wanted to touch on before transitioning. You did have one career touchdown, which I think is awesome. Fun trivia. Do you know the name of the quarterback who was sacked and fumbled the ball?
Oh, man. Well, it was the Cardinals, Arizona Cardinals. I'm not sure who with that guy. Was it Kent Graham?
Correct? Yeah. Wow. There you go. I'm surprised you got that. I had to look him up.
Out of way, way back in my memory.
Yeah, apparently he only had a couple career starts, and you got one of your only career touchdown off of him. That's pretty cool. But I wanted to bring that up because I heard you talk about it before, and I can only imagine how exciting that moment must be. Like you score, you're on defense, you're not supposed to score, but you said when you did it, you had to act like you'd been there before, and that's something that my parents always told me. I grew up playing baseball, and this is back in the day before baseball players like started going crazy on the field. And it was always like, oh, if you do well, when you're on the field, act like you've been there before. If you get really excited and you're doing something noteworthy, just act like you've been there before. It's difficult, it really is. But when you see it in the flesh, and it's from someone that you really admire, it really does set that example. Like I said, you're always leading by example, and even if you're not trying to. And when I heard you talk about this, it was on another podcast, it made me think about your son Chase. And I know I've heard you talk about so much of your testimony and how you really had to strengthen your relationship with God after everything that happened with your son. And it just made me think of how strong he is. And he never complained. Every single curveball that was thrown at him in his life, he was always up to the task. He was never down. And he's acting like he's been there before. He's acting like he's had these burdens before. He's acting like all these challenges he's gone through before. Meanwhile, it's the first time he's going through it. It's the first time you're going through it. And he's setting the example, which I just think is so crazy and it's so powerful. And I know you've said that he's taught you so much just about mental discipline and character. Um, just overall, when you find yourself in a bad situation now, maybe you haven't been in it before. What has Chase taught you about just staying calm, staying level-headed, staying in relationship with God?
It talked because he taught me a lot regarding just what you alluded to, those whole aspects of character that and leadership and just having a personal relationship and being who you are and what is your priorities in life. I mean, that's what I think the biggest thing is because my son had an autoimmune illness reaction to immunization that he just, his where his body was attacking itself. And
No.
he got to the point where he couldn't play athletics. He couldn't do a lot of things where he'd see his friends out there and he was so emaciated and here his dad is a Super Bowl champion or a big alpha male type guy.
Yeah.
And I realized it totally changed my whole outlook and priorities in life is to have empathy that what again back to God's economy, what truly matters. I mean, I could sit there and I could, for my legacy, I've been able to accomplish and achieve a lot of different things, but so what?
No.
So what? My life is not going to be defined by fighter pilot, Super Bowl champion. I hope my life is and how I'm trying to live it is defined by a son of the living God who was strove to be the best husband, the best father, the best friend that I could be. That's what I want my epitaph to read. That's what I would hope others would think about me. It's not necessarily what I think; it's what others think about me. Am I exemplifying those traits and those characteristics that I espouse that I have?
Yeah.
And that's get off the bench and get into the game, man. You gotta get out there and do it. And that's what Chase has taught me.
I always get moved when I just hear dads talking about their sons and just that strong familial bond because it's so important to me that the bond that I have with my father, the bond that I have with my mother, it's meant everything to me. Even my extended family, my grandparents, they've passed on now. My paternal grandparents have passed on. My maternal grandparents, I'm very fortunate they're still here. But those bonds are so special, and they've taught me so much just about my faith in God, exactly like we've talked about this whole conversation. Getting up, being a man of your word, doing exactly what you got to do. And I just wish more people now are listening that are able to be forward thinking and say, how do I lay the groundwork now so that whenever my kid comes along, whenever that special person in my life comes along, I can be that strong leader for them, especially men. I've heard you say this quote: when a child receives Christ, there's a 3.5% chance the rest of the family will follow. When a mother receives Christ, 17% chance. But when a father receives Christ, there's a 90% chance. I know there's a lot of roles right now in our culture where we're trying to say, all right, how do we define what it means to be manly, especially? What does that mean? I definitely think that there is a role where for us guys, we need to be a leader. We need to be that person that's going to stay strong, that's going to lead our families. And I know a lot of guys are struggling doing that, especially at our young age right now, at 20 something, and it's only going to continue to grow farther and farther. When you do your talks, what is the one question that you ask of other people so that they can help change the direction of their life and help impact themselves, help impact their family?
Well, I would ask that question of, to your point, how do you view manhood? What does it mean
Yeah.
to be a man? Is God calling us to be masculine? Look
Hmm.
at the biblical examples. Oh, that's Old Testament. That's New Testament. Okay, what did Jesus do?
Yeah.
What did he clean? I mean, he committed acts of violence, cleaning out the temple, right? Threw out all the money changers. He encouraged men to stand away. Um, the disciples were a bunch of renegade fishermen. I'll say renegade rebellion. They were blue collar guys. They were carrying swords. Look what Peter, he whopped off the ear of the high priest's servant in the Garden of Gethsemane right when they arrested Jesus. I mean, these are guys that were there. I mean,
Yeah.
we're out there, and this is where I would encourage guys, to young men particularly, to, okay, identity first and foremost. Who are you? What does it mean to be a man? And look at these examples. A man is someone who willingly will give of himself in defense to defend his family, his loved ones, and that does mean at times, if you have to protect that, it may mean committing acts of violence, defending them, taking up arms, helping the downtrodden, helping the widow, helping the orphan, giving of self, serving, working hard, providing for others, having strong relationships. I so appreciate, the quote that I tell all the guys as we leave. It's, my salutation is what Paul said in Corinthians, be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. What I would encourage young men to do is to just look at the biblical examples about manhood, and that's what God is calling us to be like, to be gentle, to be loving, but yet to protect those within your stewardship.
It's all right there in the Bible. It really is.
Amen.
Yeah, you got to read. I'm trying to do it myself, and actively trying to read more and just understand the word, take it one day at a time, have that patience like we talked about earlier, trying to set that time horizon. I think if there was one thing I had to add on to your equation and trying to keep with like the I theme, it would be identity plus integrity minus impatience equals success. And if we try to keep that time horizon in check and not try to rush everything, I think that's a pretty solid formula for doing well.
I think what you hit the nail on the head too is that your attitude is not immediate. You got a long-term focus.
Yeah.
It's strategy. It's a journey.
Yeah.
And every day learn something and add on to it. It's a cumulative effect. It's compounding interest.
Yes,
it's not immediacy. It's not now. We're not a microwave. Well, we are a microwave society, but we don't need to be a microwave society.
No, we don't.
True success is not success that is gained through discipline and over time. True wealth is gained over discipline. You look at those people that have won the lottery, or somebody that was drafted their first round. What they found in a survey they did in the NFL back in the early 90s is that a year and a half after guys left the league, they were either broke, divorced, and a lot of them didn't get their education.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you? A hastily gained inheritance will not last. That's what it's the journey. It's the discipline. It's the things that you learn along the way of life that, where true success and legacy and living excellence are all found about.
Yeah. And I love the word choice there. It's a journey, not a sprint, not a marathon. It's a journey. Yeah. Take it one day at a time. Absolutely. This has been such a pleasure. I want to ask one final question that I'm going to start making like my end of the show question. Like some shows do this. And I found the results of this question always really fascinating. And the question is, after everything you've been through, just all your life experiences, what have you learned about love? And you can interpret that any way you want, whether that be love of family, love of Christ, love of service, love of football, anything. Is there anything that you've learned that surprised you about love?
Yes, what I have learned, the most eye-opening thing is the greatest commandment that God gave us. Love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
First and foremost, your identity, it's relationship with God. Do you love God? Are you full in to glorifying, honoring him, making his name known? And then before I can love anybody else, I have to be able to love myself. Not this self-loathing, not this aspect, I'm such a loser. It's that positive self-talk. Yeah. It's giving grace to yourself, but striving, as you love God, he becomes your image of who you're striving to be, that we are sanctified through what Jesus did for us. Yeah. But yet then love others.
Yeah.
Going out. And that's, for love, it's something that a lot of particularly guys don't talk about, but because it's uncomfortable at times, but it's something that we all want, we all need, whether you're conscious of it or not. We do need that. We do need love, and it's love of the Father, love of yourself, and then love of others.
Once again, a massive thank you to Chad for joining me for that conversation. I just feel so blessed to be in a position where I can have those kinds of conversations. And I really hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed today's conversation and you want to hear even more incredible conversations, please follow along, leave a rating. It really means the world to me. I can't thank you enough for being a supporter. Until next time, see you.